So this happened less than a month ago. I'm a petite female, and I'm in my 20s. I'm currently living in Mexico to escape life a little after postgrad, in a city that's not known as a dangerous place. A lot of foreigners live here, in fact, and I haven't heard of any safety concerns. I'm living with my cousin, who works from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. The houses are in a pretty good area with a school, a nice hotel and a Starbucks within walking distance, just to give you an idea of how unexpected this was. This incident happened while my aunt was visiting us from Mexico City. She stayed home all day with me while I usually studied or watched Netflix. On this day, I was planning on having a chill day since I had woken up around 11:30. I'm watching something on my computer when I start to hear some loud pounding like someone was working on something with a hammer. This is around 12 p.m. I thought that my aunt had let someone in to repair something. I was under the assumption that my aunt was still in the house, so I wasn't too worried and just continued to watch my show. The hard noises stopped, and I heard two male voices talk casually. This made me feel more confident, if I'm being honest, that they were there to fix something. I get up from my bed to fetch my phone. I don't have any service plan down here, to message my aunts on Facebook to see what was going on. I didn't get a reply from her, so I just took it as she was busy. I go back to lying in my bed, not thinking anything of the noises. 5 minutes later, though, I hear footsteps coming up the stairs. Keep in mind that I'm laying in my bed with my back to the door when the door opens, and I see a man. He was a pretty normal-looking guy, too, with facial hair and was dressed rather clean. Like, if you saw him in public, you wouldn't think anything negative about him. As soon as he saw me, though, he shut my door and just went downstairs. And then I heard another huge noise that I later realized was him slamming the front door shut. My room is the first room directly above the stairs, so my first thought was this repairman accidentally opened the door. I thought he was trying to get access to our patio or something. Honestly, I was a little confused, but again, didn't think too much about it. I slowly walked down the stairs, calling my aunt's name, but I get no response. As soon as I make it down the stairs, I hear my aunt in a panicked voice saying that they just robbed us and they took the TV. Apparently, she forgot to lock the first iron door of the house, which made it easy for them to break and open the second door. She said that when she was walking by from the store, she noticed someone by the house. She asked him what he wanted, and she said that he was looking for a teacher. Then he got into the car with the other man, and they left. She didn't notice the TV in their car or anything suspicious, until she got to our house, that is. She also mentioned that someone had rang the doorbell before she left to go to the store, and when she went to check, no one was there. She believes that they've been watching her and my cousin, so when they opened my bedroom door, they were caught off guard and dipped. It's just really frightening to think about what could have happened if they didn't get scared off by seeing me. The cops came and were telling me, in fact, that people like this often kidnap girls or rape them. I know I got lucky on this one. A few years ago, I reconnected with an old acquaintance on social media. It started slow, and he'd like things that I posted every now and then, which grew to him liking almost everything over the course of a few months. Honestly, I just took it as a cue that he liked me but was too shy to make a move. It was cute, but not something that I paid much attention to, if I'm being honest. He generally posted cryptic lyrics, and we didn't have much in common. But around the same time, I started to get that cliche feeling like I was being watched. For reference, at the time, I lived in a house in the woods, and it would have been real easy to hide in the bushes there. Our lawnmower, it wasn't the best, but it kind of worked. You could adjust the height of the grass, and somehow that mechanism broke while my brother was out mowing the lawn one day, so we ended up with some weird patches of bald grass. No big deal, right? But later that night, though, I saw a post from that old acquaintance about patterns in the grass. It seemed like a song lyric, but I couldn't find a song that matched up with it. I didn't think too much about it until I was outside the next day and realized our lawn had some strange patterns after that mishap. I, being a big old paranoid weirdo, got a bit freaked out by this. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that it was probably nothing, right? Plus, what could I even do? The whole thing proved nothing, really. Well, a few nights later, I had that same creepy feeling, and so I went out on our porch. It's large, and there's no easy way to sneak up. We're partially earthberm, so it runs along the second story, and the edge is mostly in the air or fenced, so I felt pretty safe. I waited, though, listening for anything, and then I sort of just started, yelling, like he was there. I said that I thought that he was really creepy. I talked about all the terrible things I would do to him if he ever made the mistake of coming near me, and then I just went back inside. I know, it all sounds really dumb, but the strange thing is then he unfollowed me from all my social media, stopped liking everything I posted, and just left me alone. And when I went to his profile, he deleted that song lyric about the patterns in the grass. Maybe it was all just completely coincidental. That's what I'd like to believe. Maybe he finally got sick of my ramblings, and that just happened to coincide with my speech. Or maybe he was out there in the woods, watching and listening. I just moved into a house near my new workplace a couple of weeks ago. The house is fairly huge, but it only has 2 big bedrooms which take up most of the space, a shared kitchen and bathroom, and a small bedroom adjacent to the kitchen, which is now used as a storeroom. The guy who used to occupy the small bedroom, he moved out a couple of years ago and left some of his belongings scattered around on the floor. The owner of the house didn't bother with it at all. The lock is broken, so the door is always ajar, and we keep the lights off most of the time. I split the rent with this guy named Daniel, whom I'd never met before. We met online, and he was also looking for a quiet friend to split the rent with. He was the one who recommended the house to me, in fact. He moved in there 3 weeks earlier because I was still busy doing my work project in another town. The house has no living room, and the 2 main bedrooms are located at the front of the house adjacent to each other, and each has a front door leading to the front yard and a back door leading to the kitchen, which takes up much of the space in the back side of the house. Daniel, he doesn't talk much, and I only see him occasionally when either of us happens to be cooking in the kitchen at the same time. But most of the time, we like to keep to ourselves and don't mind each other's business. So, I had been living there for a couple of weeks when one night I invited my good friend Jerry over for dinner. Since he's really good at cooking, I left him alone in the kitchen while I just cleaned my room. Then, by the time he had to go home, he told me about how the guy next door was acting strange. When I asked him what he meant, he said that the guy was watching him while he was in the kitchen. My friend said that he caught the guy poking his head out several times and quickly hiding behind the doorframe before my friend could say anything. So I told my friend that the guy is indeed a bit strange and he doesn't talk much. And we just joked around a little, guessing around if he's gay and if he's got a crush on my friend or something. Or maybe he actually just wanted to see what was going on, or maybe he just wanted to join us but was too shy to ask. Anyway, after my friend left, I made a mental note that next time I would ask him to join us. A week later, I came home from work late at night, and as I went into the kitchen to make some tea, I found Daniel cooking his late dinner. So I told him that I'm inviting some friends over for dinner next week, and asked if he wanted to join us. He said thank you, but he would be coming home very late since he has night shift next week. I told him that I was sorry if my friend and I made too much noise in the kitchen the other night, and it bothered him. He said that he didn't know what I was talking about though, since he had got home from work really late at around 12 every night for the whole week. In fact, he would be on nights for the whole month since his friend with whom he shares the night shift's responsibilities in rotation had recently broken his leg in an accident, so he wasn't home when my friend came over. This was strange because we had assumed that he was home. I mean, why he lied, I have no idea. Maybe he was just embarrassed that my friend had caught him peeping around and thought that my friend must have told me about it. So I didn't press the matter any further. The following week, my friends came over as planned. Again, we let Jerry do all the cooking while we played some games in my room. When I went into the kitchen to check if dinner was ready, Jerry told me that the guy did it again. He apparently watched him quietly, and just like before, he poked his head out of the doorframe, only to hide as quick as possible when caught. And this time, Jerry said hi and asked if he wanted to join us, but this weirdo didn't answer him. This is where it all got really strange too. I told Jerry that that was impossible since Daniel was still at work, but then he told me to go and check the room myself if I didn't believe him, pointing at the small bedroom. When I told him that the room is empty and it's a storeroom, he didn't believe me. He said that he thought it's Daniel's room since that's where he'd seen him poking his head out to peep at him. And I told him no, Daniel's room is the one next to the bathroom. We frowned at each other for a while, and then, almost instantly, we both walked to the storeroom to open the door, only to find it empty and dark. All the windows were closed, and the only entrances into the house are through the front door of my room and Daniel's, and a back door next to the bathroom. We would have seen them if somebody had entered the house through my room. My friends are now convinced that the room is haunted. When I asked Daniel about it, he said that he had no idea. I've tried to ask the owner about the house. He said that nobody has ever died in the house, that he knows of at least. I have also tried asking around to find out more about the history of the house, and so far I always get the same answer, which leads me to the guy who used to occupy it. If there is a ghost in that room, he must know something about it. But since the owner of the house doesn't have his phone number, I have no idea how to contact him. One of the things that bothered me the most, though, is how indifferent Daniel is about all this. He just carries on with life as if nothing's happened. It makes me think that he must know something as well, since he was the one who recommended the house to me. But being such a weird and quiet person, I don't think I would get anything from him. I've been thinking these past few days. I really like living here, but the fact that there may be something watching me, or that my roommate may be lying and stalking me, it quietly makes me feel really creeped out. I grew up in the deep south, a region cloaked in mystique as much as it is tragedy. I was not raised religious. My family did believe in God, but my parents had more faith in an education than a pulpit. I moved out when I was 20. This was the height of the recession. Jobs were shit and going to school was a must. I was working by day and doing a few classes by night. The first thing that happened was when I received a call from my landlord while I was at work one day.
Hi, Sam? Are you home?
Hi. No, I'm actually at work.
Well, I drove up and noticed that your door was open. And when I came back, I was going to swing by and say hey, and what do you know? Your door was not only closed, but it was locked.
Honestly, I was confused by that whole conversation and considered that maybe someone broke in or something. But being at work and being busy, I didn't think much of it. Work was so fast-paced and I just quickly forgot about it all. Oh, and I forgot to mention my place was in the middle of a BFE. I did have him check my place to make sure that I wasn't missing anything, and he did, and it was all there. That night I drove home, and I got home and noticed that things felt off. I didn't mind it. I mean, I had schoolwork to do, so I just got busy and eventually just went to sleep. But over the next few days, though, things began to happen. My lights turned off, and when I got up and turned them on, they just switched off again. Also, when I would turn my lights off, I swear that I could see a figure standing in my doorway. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, though, but then came the dreams, and they were just so vivid. For almost a week straight, I had the most horrible dreams that I've ever had, and these dreams don't feel as if they're from me. I know that sounds confusing, but I can see and smell and even taste. I think it should also be noted that I was not drinking or doing drugs, and these dreams were just unlike anything I've ever experienced. To give you a better idea, I'm going to tell it in the perspective I experienced it from. So, there's a fire, and the whole village is burning. I can hear screaming, and there are concussions from gunshots. It burns my nose, and there's smoke. I see little ones and women running away. I hear the other men screaming and fighting. I'm looking for someone, my wife and child. Where are they? Why are they attacking us? And then I see them. 2 white men. One brown-haired with a beard and the other dirty blonde. I hear them yelling. They're speaking in English, but I can't understand them. One raises his weapon to me. Smoke rolls and I hit the ground. I can taste something like copper, and I think it's blood in my mouth. And all I can think of is, where are they? And then it just goes black. I wake up sweating, drenched in fact, and I feel like I've lost someone dear to me. I would be lying if I said that I didn't break down and weep. The absolute loss that I felt was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I started staying later at work after this, looking for any reason to not go home. But the last straw for me was when I heard the music. I was studying for a test and my window was open. I had my headphones on listening to some garbage rap song, anything to get me through this study guide. And then I began hearing something through my headphones. I didn't have them up loud. It was coming from outside of my window. It's a wind instrument and drums. And all I can say is that the tune was really sad. I don't know what it meant, but it was just so sad. And it just got louder. At this point, I'm pretty certain that I must be going crazy. I grabbed a weapon, sure that someone was outside, a loaded magazine, and burst outside. I sweep the fields with my weapon light, and there's nothing. No sound, no music, no people. It's close to 11 p.m. and I call my dad and tell him everything that's going on. I'm pretty sure that I'm losing my mind. Maybe I've cracked from stress or something. But my father tells me something that kind of reassures me that I'm not. Where I live, behind me was a Native American burial ground. And if you know anything about Native Americans, you know that they generally didn't build mounds down south. My father also told me that I wasn't the first report to this kind of thing. Numerous family friends and hunters had reported hearing and seeing things while hunting or working back there over the years. Whispers and whistling. Well, needless to say, I left the next week. And since leaving, I haven't had one issue. I've never really shared this in fear that I'd be called fake or attention-seeking. I did some research and was able to find that most tribes that built mounds down there did so if they were being forced to leave an area. Many did it as a last-ditch effort. Generally, they would have longhouses devoted to keeping their elders' remains. And it's very likely that the ones in my area were rounded up and sent off on the Trail of Tears. You may say I'm lying or crazy, but this is my story. This is the story of my first stalker and how he tried to murder me. When I was in middle school, I was incredibly awkward, as most middle schoolers are, right? I was lanky, thin, and not unliked, but not popular. I was a tomboy, and I grew up to be a lesbian. And yes, this is an important detail. And I'm pretty sure half the school had figured out my sexuality before I even did. So, it came as a great shock to me and half the school when a boy did eventually ask me out. I had a crappy home life and was desperate for attention, so despite not really liking the guy at first, I said yes. My friends were happy for me for less than a week, before my best friend and one of the prettiest girls in the school came up to me and told me that while I'd been out for lunch with our other mutual friend, she had seen him sulking around the subway we'd eaten at. I found this confusing and a bit weird, but didn't really pay much mind. The next few outings, I did keep an eye out, and he did indeed follow me. Keep in mind, he is my boyfriend, and we're literally dating. He doesn't have to act like this. He's not being shy and trying to ask me out, and not sure how. He's already done that. So, the question becomes, why is he following me? Now, I am confused, but middle school me brushes it off thinking all boys are like this. Maybe he's just jealous or something. But his fears weren't entirely unfounded, I'll admit, as this other kid who I didn't know at all frequently liked to come up to me and say things that were really awkward, which honestly was what the fuck. But that's a story for a different time. So I just assume that he's just following me because he's jealous or something. A week later, I'm done with this shit and confront him about it. He gives me the weakest excuse. I'm just protecting you. But this is lame for several reasons. One, wouldn't it make sense to just come with me and not stalk me from a distance? Two, I'd once and very publicly punched a boy 2 years older than me in the face for grabbing my ass and refusing to let go until I hit him. I've made it clear that I can look after myself. So this doesn't sit right with me, but I tell him to knock it off and just leave it at that. And to make a long story short, he doesn't, and I just dump his ass. A few days after the dumping, through gossip and my friends being concerned, I come to learn that not only did he stalk me while we dated, he did it before and after as well. He didn't take the breakup well, and his solution to cope was to draw these comics, I guess, where he was an alien prince rescuing me, a human princess from entire armies. It involved a lot of self-deprecation, both in and out of character, and disturbingly well-drawn gore. I know this because I constantly found them in my locker. It got so bad that I actually brought it up with the school, and he was moved classes and a bunch of other stuff to keep him away from me. They wouldn't expel him since all they had was my word, but this was fine with me, as that felt a little extreme at that point. He'd never hurt me, and I honestly didn't think he would. How wrong I was, though. So, that was the end of it, or so I thought. A year and a half later, we all graduated, and I thought I'd never see him again. The unfortunate reality, though, was it wasn't. I'm second-generation French, and my parents felt that it was important that I go to a French immersion to keep in touch with my roots. This meant that I went to the nearest French immersion high school, which was his default assigned school. This wasn't a huge problem, though. It's a big school. So the first year passes without any incident. By mid-11th grade, however, almost all of my female friends have mentioned that they think they're being followed. Sure enough, my one friend from the same middle school, Jillian, gets followed, and she confirms my suspicions. It's my stalker ex-boyfriend. At this point, I am irate and really pissed off. It's been 2.5 years. I mean, get over it, right? Move on and stop being the kind of person who follows my friends around the mall. Honestly, looking back, I wish that I had said something sooner. A day after, my middle school friend confirms for me that my other friend, Sarah, comes to school with her knuckles bruised and murder in her eyes. Sarah tells us that last night, she'd awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of her cat Ringo crying. But not just crying, meowing and hissing like nuts right in her ear. It turns out, Ringo had caught sight of the stalker on the balcony, just staring into her window and just standing there in the pouring rain. No umbrella, no hat, just standing there in a t-shirt and jeans, soaking wet in the middle of October. Her knuckles were bruised because in the seconds between waking up and seeing him, she jumped out of bed and, out of pure fear and instinct, had punched the window. It apparently scared him off, but she wasn't going to just let him get away with this. She screams for her dad, and together they chase him like 4 blocks before losing him. They called the cops, but they didn't do much aside from say, "Well, he's gone now. Call us if he turns back up." Obviously, she was livid. But there's nothing we can do about it, though, at this point, except walk together and glare daggers at him whenever we see him. A week later, Jillian comes to school and informs us Stalker had skulked outside her store for her entire 6-hour shift the night before. This was the last straw for all of us. We all decided that we'd confront him next time we saw him, as long as we weren't alone, that is. And the opportunity arises that very day. After school ended, we all gathered on the train station to head home. I'm on the platform with Jillian, Sarah, and my at-the-time girlfriend Blake and 2 male friends. One who's slightly autistic and one who's a tank of a guy standing at 6'2" and regularly hits the gym. His name was Jake. Jillian catches sight of the stalker and points him out. I ask my friends to hang back while I confront him, but tell them to just keep an eye on us, and they all reluctantly agree. Now, at this point, I still think that he's a harmless weirdo who just needs to get his head out of his ass before someone actually beats him for what he's doing. I walk up to him and tell him that he needs to just stop stalking me, to stop stalking my friends, and just never look at us again. I'm being firm but polite. And his immediate reaction is to call me a disgusting dyke and yada yada yada, more homophobic slurs. You're going to hell, blah blah blah. Nothing I haven't heard a billion times before. I tell him once more to just stop bothering me, stop following my friends, and learn some manners before I get the cops involved. And he gets all tense and rigid, and I'm thinking good, and mentioning cops scares him. But he's not scared. And before I can really think about what's happening, he pushes me off the platform and in front of an oncoming train. I fell backwards and hit my head against the railing, and I was really dazed. A few things happened all at once after that. Blake screamed so loud and with such fear in her voice that I can still hear it to this day, almost 8 years later. My autistic friend, startled by the noise and also having seen me fall, runs the opposite way screaming murder at the top of his lungs. Jake was moving before I'd even fallen all the way. By now, I had just started to recover and started getting to my knees, just in time to see him plow into this guy like a fucking linebacker on steroids. They hit the ground and he put his fist into the stalker's face, and they're both yelling. Jillian and Sarah have run after my autistic friend towards the end of the platform and towards 2 peace officers running onto the scene. Blake has caught up to us and is screaming my name and telling me to get up. The train horn is blaring, and I'm still dazed, swaying in place and trying to figure a way up back onto the platform. I remember Blake grabbing for my hand, despite being too far and too high up, and sobbing and begging for me to climb. Please, just climb. I'm not sure what it was. A survival instinct, Blake's fear and pain, or the sheer desire to just get up and punch him for myself. But I do a really shitty run and jump at the edge of the platform. I hit it pretty hard and not high enough. Just enough to wind me, though. Blake, Jake, and several other strangers all surge forward and grab me anywhere they can and reach and pull me up just seconds before the train comes into the station. It's a serious blur after that, too. I remember Blake holding me and crying and rocking and touching me anywhere she can. My arms, face, chest and legs, anywhere as if to make sure I'm real. The other people on the platform are all on their phones calling 911 and offering help where they can. I think some were comforting my friends or others. There were a lot of shocked and crying people on that platform. By now, the 2 peace officers have arrived. One is doing damage control and talking to Jake, the only one really capable of doing so at that moment. The other is checking on the would-be murderer and cuffing him once he's on his feet. Everyone gave their statements and paramedics arrive, and I'm taken to the hospital and the would-be murderer as well. I remember Blake being glued to my side the whole day and night. I remember getting to the hospital and talking to the cops and having a really big headache. And I've either forgotten or blocked most of the other stuff out, to be honest. Eventually, I'm given my diagnosis, just a minor concussion, before being allowed to go home. The would-be murderer is carted off and most certainly going to jail. And I know that he's alive and going away for a really long time. And at that moment, that's all I care about. The whole ordeal lasted 3-ish years, and seriously messed with far too many people's psyche and ability to feel safe afterwards. It's 7, almost 8 years later since that day, and I still wake up with nightmares and sometimes screaming. I'm no longer with Blake, due to reasons completely unrelated, but she was what really got me through all that crazy. I'm with someone else now, engaged actually, and Jake is said to be my best man, because without him, and Blake and the bravery of the several strangers, I wouldn't be alive today to tell you this story.